So, welcome to another episode here at Back to Classics. Today is the start of a brand new project. It's going to be the restoration of this 1975 Ducati 750 Super Sport. Quite a remarkable bike, quite a remarkable model. And well, that's what was up here. As you might think, looking at this bike from a distance, that it is in a quite good condition. It's actually not, as we can show you as we delve into this bike a little deeper. So there's a lot to be done here. A complete nut and bolt restoration. Well, we're going to show you in a minute how this bike is going to be eventually, what we can expect from the restoration, how we are going to do that. But first, let's delve into the history behind this model a little bit deeper to see how it came about and what we can expect when this bike will be finished eventually. So, getting into the background of this 1975 model, we have to go back a little further to 1972 when Ducati introduced the 750 L-Twin in its first incarnation, the first V-twin made by Ducati. And that was fitted to the 750 GT, the 750 Sport, and ultimately to the 750 Super Sport in 1974, commonly known as the green frame. But the engine had problems, not so much in the technical term when it was finished, but it was an absolute nightmare to construct, something that we still see when we rebuild these engines. But the problem was that the distribution to the cylinder heads of that bike was unbelievably complex. And even in the factory, it was a known fact that Ducati had, for the workers assembling these engines, they had a total of 8 to 10 hours needed in order to finish one engine. So the accountant got into the game, and they said, well, this is absolutely terrible. We're actually producing these engines at a loss. So it was a little bit back to the drawing board at that time, at which Fabio Taglioni, a famous Ducati engineer, he designed a outer plate that we can show you. An outer plate on the engine where the whole distribution system was indirect. And this was an absolutely marvelous idea to get the production time of these engines down. So that worked, it worked absolutely beautiful. At the same time, Ducati wanted to make a step forward, and the design of the 750 engine was regarded as a little bit old-fashioned, maybe a little bit too rounded, which is why we call it a round case today. So they hired Giugiaro, a famous designer. He was working at Ital Design at the time. And Ital Design came up with a brand new design, not only the design of the engine, they in fact created a new logo, and they also designed the 860 GT. And that was first introduced to the public in 1974. And that model was meant to replace in fact, the whole product line of the 750, so the 750 GT, which would be a logical step, but also the 750 Sport and the Super Sport, all to be replaced by, more of a touring model, not a very sporty model as the Super Sport and also the Sport was. Soon came the demand for a real sporty model, so not only this more touring type model. It wouldn't suit Ducati's pedigree as a racing company as well, so demand came for a super sport. And what Taglioni actually was then reluctantly assigned to was to design a 750 Super Sport, or rather just a Super Sport model based on the existing technology. Now at the time they had this newly developed 860 square case engine with these Giugiaro designed outer covers, making it all square. And what they did is get back 1 year in production to the 750 Super Sport round case and borrow a lot of components to create a new Supersport for 1975. So the design of the cylinder heads, in fact the whole of the frame, much of the bodywork, much of the parts that were actually are similar or actually the same as a 1974 round case Supersport. So what they ended up with is it's a hardcore 750 and 900, which we'll talk about later, Supersport model for 1975. So it was soon thought that as the 860 GT was already there, and with 864 cc displacement, that it could be a 900 Supersport, which would have been perfect, of course, in many markets. So, but Ducati used to sell a lot of these bikes in Italy, and in Italy there was a racing series going on at the same time, but with a maximum displacement of 750 cc. So they had both displacements available at the same time, creating effectively a 750 Supersport, as we see here, and actually the same model being a 900 Supersport. The only difference, apart from obvious the displacement, or in fact the bore of the cylinder, was the color of the fairing, where the 750 Supersport had a silver fairing with a blue stripe. The 900 Supersport had a blue fairing with a silver stripe. So that's in fact the only way, apart from some very minor details, where you can spot the difference between a 750 and a 900 Supersport of this year. But as we go along and take this project a step further, I will show you a lot more of the specific details of the 1975 Supersport. So when it comes to a restoration project, we have a very strict way of doing that here at Back to Classics. We always work according to a strict face-to-face approach. And the first phase is always to make sure that that all of the frame and bodywork is in good condition, is in the way we want it eventually. Now we're not focusing on the beautiful finish of the bike, but that's for a later stage. So it doesn't matter if the paint is not in a perfect condition or that the decals are not placed in the correct way. But what we do aim for is the frame being completely straight, has all the brackets and lugs and everything in place in the correct condition. And also all the bodywork parts, so ranging from the front mudguard to the rear, the fuel tank, the fairing screen. So making sure that when we step back from the bike, it is correct in 100% way, not so much finished, but at least with all the parts fitted to the bike the way they should be. So that's in fact what we're going to discuss in this episode. And moving forward into the project, we will continue making more episodes on this project, where phase 2 will be the complete disassembly of the bike up to the last nut, and that's also when we can see what the condition of many parts, especially the engine parts, are. So there's much of an inspection and cleaning of many parts. So with that finished, it's completely disassembled. Then phase 3 is when we ship out all the parts to our suppliers for surface treatment, meaning that we are going to ship out all the parts that need chroming, all the parts that need painting, all the parts that need zinc plating, all the parts that need polishing, etc., etc. Then phase 4 is once all these parts are back. Phase 4 is going to be the engine rebuild. With that done, we move into phase 5, which will be the bike rebuild, so the motorcycle build, so to speak, and moving into the 6th and final phase, which is driving, testing, and adjusting. And that concludes a complete restoration. So moving forward, let's dive into phase 1, bodywork and frame. Okay, so this is the condition the bike was brought to us. We actually did not do anything to it yet, but this gives us the opportunity to have a very good look at how bodywork is placed on the frame as it is presented to us. And immediately we thought, well, hey, here is something going on, here's something wrong. And that has to do with this rear frame loop, as you can see here. Normally, the angle, it should be upward slightly, following, in fact, the contour, as you see here, of the fiberglass seat. But in fact, this one drops down. So the angle is, well, it's not correct. So that is going to be addressed here right now, after I pick up the phone. So with that done, we can continue with our actual work, which is here in the workshop. So let's remove this one, this side cover, and see what we find behind there. Yeah, well, that is... One can argue whether this is original. I don't think it is, given the shape of these fans here. But what is certainly not original is this extra bracket that someone has welded on here. That is, and what we can find here. Let's remove this one, because it seems to be original, but yeah, I think so. But we'll have to check, wait and see. Let's go to the other side and do the same there. And I immediately see that also here there's an extra screw in a place where it shouldn't be. So here as well, they have someone has added an extra bracket onto the frame. Yep, just as I thought. So it seems that these brackets are at least original from the start, but this is a later addition, which is not needed because, well, we never find these side covers missing. So moving on to the seat, and we already see that this is quite loose. There it is. Yep. Something not original at all. These shouldn't be there, these brackets. And what they in fact did was these pins that should be longer with a mechanism that slides over there, that's completely missing. So, quite a lot of work to do here, I guess. We can also tell that this rear mudguard is not the original. That's a much later version. Probably one from a much later Supersport, or maybe even a Mike Hillwood replica. So let's remove the fuel tank and see what we find underneath there. I did make sure it's empty, by the way. That we have done as a preparation. But I immediately see this bracket holding the fairing. The original one is missing. There we go. Quite remarkable for this bike to still have the original ignition system, because this is actually a very problematic ignition system. It was made by Ducati Electrotecnica and was introduced in 1975 on the 750 GT, sorry, the 860 GT and 750 and 900 Supersport. But actually these models were absolutely horrific, known for being for breakdowns. And I think, given the fact that this is all loose, and this has been pulled down, and an extra non-original relay has been fitted, I think that someone tried to get the bike running again, but eventually just gave up. But that's going to be addressed later on. We'll first focus on the bodywork. And apart from this, I don't know if you can see it, I could show you here, the steering damper, that is a non-original steering damper fitted later on. So again, you can see here this bracket was welded on by someone as well. But that's just a delete job. What we have to focus on first is to get the mudguard, the seat and the side covers in place in a good way. So moving to the front top half fairing, I noticed that, well, something was not correct in how it was fitted, and I measured another fairing, which I know is original, and I measured this length to be 75 centimeters, where in fact this one is 72.5. So a piece is missing here, as well as the whole of this piece here on the inner side of the fairing. Same goes for the other side, by the way. Next up is this bracket, which I already saw is not the original. This should be a sort of a cross bracket holding the fairing. And we see here this bracket welded to the frame has bent outward. Was bent outward. It was because it's also left and right the same. Probably to fit this fairing or another place. But moving forward, we have this bracket holding the headlight and the fairing. And you can see here that someone has welded it there as well. So it could very well be shorter, making the whole of the fairing move back a little bit. So that frame bracket is going to be needs to be adjusted. So that gives us a little bit of an overview for the first phase. The front mudguard is actually original and in good condition, so that we can leave alone. The fairing needs adjustment, obviously. I think we're going to replace it with a new one in correct shape and size, as well as this bracket here. Then for the first phase, focusing on the frame, we need to remove this bracket, straighten out this one, remove this one, remove this one, fit a new bracket here for the seat, and adjust the frame loop in the upright position. Then that rear mudguard needs replacing for a new item in correct size and shape. That one needs re-drilling as well, of course. The seat, I think we can use the seat that was supplied, but then only the fiberglass part. I think it's original, but some further investigation is needed. Then we have to adjust the same here. This bracket needs to come off. And this needs to be smooth and straight, of course. And again here, this bracket needs to be straightened. So that concludes the scope, we think, for phase one of this project, which we're now going to delve in a little bit deeper. Well, excuse me for someone going at it on the grinding machine, but well, it's a workshop, running workshop here. Huh? So let's discuss what issues we have further on this bike. It's largely original, that must be said, but there are some parts that are non-original and well, need replacing. One is the front rim. It is a Borani, but not the correct rim and not the correct inscription here. So that's something that we definitely have to look into. What is original is the front brake system, which is quite remarkable because the first the first V-twin Ducati to receive Brembo brake system, which they use up to the very day. But this is actually very good. And remarkable for the 1975 is this specific master cylinder with a shaved off piece there where the mirror mount used to be. But this obviously doesn't need a mirror because you're fast enough not to look behind you. Moving forward, what is original is what seems to be largely the engine numbers, frame numbers all correct. The specific 1975 kickstart lever. The specific very early Delorto PHM 40 with the shaved smooth body, at least in the front. We'll move to the rear later. The whole of the linkage, all is original. The exhaust system, linkage, I say, well, it's original, but it has a lot of play, so that's going to be addressed. The rear shocks are original. Unfortunately, the rear rim, the Borani rim, again, is not the original. Has been replaced. And some huge fat tires, but they need to be replaced anyway, so that's going to be all right. Moving to the other side. Again, here some butchering. We see here a part that says Bimota, which indicates it's not for a Ducati, and it is not, because the rear brake system, like the front, should be this shaved Brembo P08 caliper, and that is gone missing. Instead, they fitted a P05 of a Panta, much smaller size, and you can see here on the wear on the disc that the caliper actually only well, it got half of the disc instead of the whole of the friction surface that should be fitted by the brake pads, of course. So this whole setup is non-original, and someone created this out of leftover parts from the bin, probably. What is original, again, is the master cylinder, specific again for this 1975. This carburetor, unfortunately, is not the smooth body, so much sought after early type PHM, but a later one. Not that it's not going to work with this one, it's probably just as good or even better as the smooth body carburetors, but well, if you're puristic in originality as we are, then this is not correct for a 1975 model. But moving further, most of the parts are there. Again, front brake system on the left side, and correct headlight, Aprilia JOD. Correct instruments, albeit they are fitted in the wrong way. This should be underneath the dashboard and not on top, but that's an easy job. Yeah, well, front fork seems to be okay. Largely there, some parts missing, but we'll get it sorted in the end. Forgot to mention that the whole of the chain guard is missing. Nothing there. So that's something that's going to be on our shopping list for this project. Moving on with the 1975 750 Supersport restoration. Still in the first phase of the project, which is frame and bodywork. So we're going to make sure that all the bodywork parts are fitted correctly and that the frame lugs are all in shape and in places that they should be. So as you can see, we removed the rear mudguard, we removed the number plate holder, the rear light, the seat, the side covers. And we're now going to pay attention to the frame, as some additional lugs and brackets have been welded in place that should not be there, as well as the rear frame loop that is bent out of shape. Perhaps we can show you or compare it with another frame, but this rear frame loop is pointing down a little bit where it should be pointing up. So we're going to address that first up, and then we're going to fit a new rear mudguard as well as a new rear number plate holder, rear light, and get the shape more to the correct specifications before we move on to more of the front of the bike, fairing, fuel tank, and stuff like that. So let's get the grinders out. So we made some good progress with the Super Sport. Now with the mudguard fitted as it should be, as well as the number plate holder and the rear light. And we can now move on with the seat, but that had been butchered by someone. So that needs some repair of the fiberglass unit below. So that's up. Next job we're going to do with this. It is the original seat, so we're definitely going to use that. Meanwhile, I've also removed the fairing, and we found, already knew that there was something the case, but this bracket holding the fairing, the headlamp and the dashboard is not the original one. So in order to make a good fitting of that, we need to remove first all the non-original parts and start with assembling the bike as it should be. So first up is the disassembly of this whole area. Well, what I found here, some incorrect electrics where the yellow, red and blue wires are all fitted together with a, well, not even a connector, it's just a little bit of tape around it. So that's not how it should be. Let's take it apart. So here we have the dashboard removed, but this is not the way it should be fitted together. As you can see, the rubber pots holding these instruments are sort of, well, squished between the dashboard, which should be underneath. Next to the fact that it is a non-original fiberglass dashboard and not the correct one made out of plastic. So take it apart further and see what we can use. So this is all set up nicely. As you can see, there's a new bracket there, new brackets for the fairing mount, original headlight still attached, and a new dashboard, correct for the 1975, in fact the same as used in 74, as you can see here. And well, with all the brackets and stuff in place, we can now move on to the fairing. And I've put together these two fairings. On the left you see the one that came with this bike, but is in fact one from 1976 onwards, which is a little narrower than the original fairing that was used on the 74 and 75 bikes. And the difference might be very minor, but as you can see in this area here, on both sides obviously, this 1976 fairing is a little narrower. And we were lucky enough to get hold of a 74 or 75 fairing once, and we made a mold out of that for our fiberglass reproduction parts. And this is a correct shape 1974-75 fairing, which is a little wider at this area here. So there's the difference. Obviously, this being a 1975 bike, we're going to fit that white one on the left. Sorry, on the right. And we'll continue with that right now. So this concludes the first phase of this 1975 750 Supersport restoration, and we will now continue with phase 2, which is to completely take it apart up to the last nut and bolt, so we are able to inspect all the little details and know about this bike much more than we do already. So that is for a next episode. Hope you will find that on our channel later. Talking about that, we recently started with this YouTube channel, and well, we see things coming along. More and more people start to find our channel, which is a good thing, of course. So if you have any suggestions on how we should continue with this channel, subjects you would like to know more of, or things that you think we should do less of, let us know in the comments below, and we'll be sure to read them and develop our channel the best way that we can. So this concludes this episode here at Back to Classics. We will be back with this bike in future videos. Be sure to subscribe and follow our channel. For this time, thank you for watching. Toodaloo-dokie. See you next time.